Hello class, today we're going to talk about SVGs and media queries. And we're working on our responsive robot that you designed in Illustrator. And we're going to learn how to make this responsive with our browser window. But before we jump into that, let's just backpedal a tiny bit to what SVGs are, as well as what media queries are. And this is going to be an umbrella statement because this is more of a tutorial, but obviously in the readings given, you can look at this deeper. But let's start with SVG. So SVGs came around. They're amazing because they are scalable vector graphics, and that's the exact definition of what SVG stands for, meaning we can make them small or large, tiny or huge, and we're never going to have to worry about pixelization. And if you've seen anything on the web, especially as we have moved into Retina display, images it's really difficult sometimes to have the most crisp, clean images that we really want for our web pages as well as our logos. So this SVG graphic is based on an XML format, and that's the language that it's written in. And you can see down here, we can just look at a brief example. The nice thing about an SVG is you can either link to an SVG and link to it as just how we would link to a JPEG, GIF, or PNG in HTML by using the image tag, or you can actually embed the SVG into your HTML document. And that's what we're going to do today because we have the most control over changing aspects of the SVG. So if you look here, we have a basic HTML, and I'm going to look at this and then try again. So here is our SVG graphic, and it starts with an SVG open tag and finishes with the closing tag, just as an H1 paragraph div. It's a tag, and after that it's stating a width and a height, and then you can see it's actually using a tag circle with a circumference of the X and circumference of the Y and the radius of 40. It has a stroke of green, the stroke width is 4 pixels, and the fill is yellow. And we can see right here that that is generated in our code. So we can play with this and change this. Say, let's make the stroke 10 a little bit thicker and see results. And you can see it'll automatically update our SVG in our browser. This is amazing. We don't have to go back to Illustrator, resave. It's right there in your code. And it's not going to pixel. So some really great additions to our image formats. So SVG stands for Scalable Vector Graphic. It's used to define a vector-based graphic for the web. It uses the XML format. Graphics do not lose any quality when they're zoomed in or resized, hence the word vector. Each element and every attribute in the SVG file can be animated, and that's kind of where we're going with this, is that we're naming these attributes or elements, and then we're going to be able to animate them coming up. Some advantages of using them: they're created and generated in any text editor. You can search, they're searchable, they're scalable, they'll print at a high resolution, they're zoomable, and they're basically what happened when Flash died. When Flash died, now we needed a new way to have vector graphics that could animate and transition. And that's kind of where this all emerged from. So now that we know what SVG graphics are, we're going to take our SVG robot and make him scalable with our browser window, and that's called responsive. So responsive web design essentially is, and we can go to any website to kind of demonstrate that. In this case, let's go to do a nice search. Here's a portfolio of a designer and developer. Can we click on you to view you? Hold on. So here we have David Hellman, who has his portfolio site. And you can see here I'm on screen right now, meaning I'm viewing this on a screen. But if I go to the bottom right of my window, you can see I can scale this window down. And as I scale this down, notice how the typography changes and adapts to the window. And this is about tablet size here. And then as we go to mobile, you can see it changes again. And even the navigation has changed to the bottom. The logo has jumped to the top upper left. And that kind of changes depending on size. And you can see it hops back. That is considered responsive. It's responding to the width and height of our browser window. In this case, I'm using Firefox. It's responding. So that is what responsive means. It's responding to our width and height. And we can use these media rules in several ways, but here's an example. So in our CSS, what we're going to do is we're going to set an at media. The at media says that anything with a minimum width, as you can see here, of 480 will have this background color of light green. So it's setting parameters for what size or resolution, depending what you want. It could be, we could define by width and height. We could do device. We can just say on screen, do this, on tablet, do this. Orientation, if you want, if it's the iPad, landscape or portrait. You can do resolution. So we can really narrow it down, and basically the CSS, the media query checks what the parameters of the browser are and then picks the correct media query to show on screen. So it's really great, and we're going to do some examples of this that I think will make more sense. So what we're going to do now is let's hop over real quick to, I'm going to use brackets. So I gave you a root folder, SVG Media Queries, and it just has an index and a style sheet within it. And if you look at the index page, you can see it's a basic HTML blank document, and it is linking to a style sheet called style.css. And there's nothing in the body. This is really blank. If we go to the style sheet, now this looks a little bit different. So this is kind of my template for when I'm creating a responsive website. So I would actually take this and save a copy and put it in a safe place, because you will refer back to this in the future. So we're going to start at the top and move down. So when a browser, Firefox or Chrome, reads this CSS document, it starts right up here and then zooms down all the way down to the bottom. So first thing it reads is body background color red. And I always think about the top as screen. These are the overall principles for everything as well as screen. Then, as we come down here, it hits a media query for screen and a minimum width of 481 to 800. That's tablet size. So anything between those two sizes, the background color is going to be changed to blue. So it's going to override this red with blue. And then the same thing down below for mobile. Anything that has a maximum of 480, the background would change to yellow. Now notice here that in between we set the media query, and then there's two little squigglies here. In between those two squigglies are all the properties that would be used for mobile and all that would be used for tablet. They have to be in between those two squigglies, and don't confuse those with your own squiggly. So there's a lot going on. You want to stay organized. Notice we don't have that at the top because this is for all devices. Not only screen, but all devices, all sizes, kind of the universal properties, because maybe you want to have an H1 in there that's always going to be red, or a paragraph that's always going to have a line height of 2M or whatnot. So let's just preview this so you can see how this works. So here, as asked, the body background color is red. When we go down to tablet size, it changes to blue. And when we go down to mobile, it turns to yellow. So it's following these 3-tier principles that we have set in our CSS with media queries. This is exactly what we're going to do with our responsive robot. We're going to set parameters for him on screen and tablet and mobile. All right, so let's bring him over and get this going. I'm going to jump back to Adobe Illustrator, and a couple things you want to do to prep your file before we bring it over. First thing you want to do is make sure your robot is 100% vector, amazing, shows your personality. Creativity always counts in art classes. So I'm looking for something fun here. After you're done creating this vector, you want to make sure everything again is completely vectored. No bitmap images. I'm going to go to my artboard and make sure my artboard is the size of the robot. So you want to kind of take your artboard in so it's nice and close as you can kind of get. Like that. Then what you're going to do is you want to go back in and you want to label each path or line. I'm going to move this to the back because it bothers me. Send it back. There we go. So, for instance, I can click on this path, the right side of him, and I'm going to label that in my layers palette. Open up your layers, and I called that body 2. So I'm labeling each path, so when we bring that over into the SVG, into the HTML, it has a name. It's not just rectangle, circle, path. This I'm going to name body 2. I think I have like foot 1 and foot 2. So you want to go through and name at least, 10 to 15 of these. So when we bring it over, you can animate or start by changing the color of these properties. So after you label them in your layers palette, now we can go to File, Save As, and we're going to change our file format from AI to SVG. Now, I, of course, would keep an AI version of your robot. I always like to keep a hard copy somewhere safe that if I wanted to go back or I wanted to use this in print later where it's not just floating in a HTML somewhere. So I'm going to change that to SVG. I'm going to hit Save, and we come up with these SVG options. And our handout goes into this a little bit more, but we want to keep it at SVG 1.1. If there was type, I would convert this to outlines, and technically I would create outlines myself before we even got to this point. Fonts do not do well with SVGs. Here we can talk about, do we want to embed or link to it? We're going to embed this. I'm going to keep style attributes under CSS properties. And I'm going to make sure it says responsive right here. All important. Now I'm going to click SVG code, and it's going to pop up my text editor and actually give me all the code that makes up this robot in SVG. And you can see tags, and we're going to copy that, and we're going to come over to brackets, go into our index.html, and I'm going to paste it right in my body, just like I would another image. I'm going to hit save, and I'm going to test it by going to that little lightning bolt in the upper right-hand corner to make sure I can see him. And there he is, right there in our document. So the nice thing about this is you can notice you can just copy and paste and embed that code in there. And if I come here and look at all this, it can make my head explode. But if you look at it, for instance, we have, here's a circle. It has a fill color of this hex number. It has a stroke color of this. It has a stroke width of this, so on and so forth. The circle has a circumference of the X and Y, a radius. So all the information is there, and we could change it right in the code. And that's what we're going to kind of start from. So first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to go up to the top of my SVG, and I'm going to delete this little bit of extra that Adobe Illustrator places in, and I want to start right after body with the word SVG. So you can see our SVG tag starts right here, and if I scroll all the way to my bottom, it closes right here. And all of this is my SVG. You can see, since I named my layers, that each path has now an ID that has the name of that layer. So here you see eyelid 1, eyelid 2, that we're going to use in the CSS to create a responsive eyelid 1 and eyelid 2. Now, let's back up here. I like to be really organized when I'm working, and I have made a list of all the layers that I have named. So I know I have pupil 1, pupil 2, body 1, body 2, foot 1, foot 2, eyelid 1, eyelid 2, and I make a list because now we just made a big jump from working in layers to working in code. And being organized is going to help make this not painful and kind of just zip through. So I know what I have labeled, and I also know that on tablet, I'm going to change my color scheme from my original color scheme to this color scheme, which I broke down my hex numbers. And then on mobile, I'm going to change the color again to this color scheme. And this is what I want you to do, is basically have one color scheme for screen, one for tablet, and one for mobile. So it's a responsive robot that's changing color right now based on the browser width. So with that being said and all this organized, I can come back over to my code and I can search for, say I want to find body 1. So I'm going to do a Command F or Control F if you're on a PC, and I'm going to look for body 1. And the nice thing about when you have a mass amount of code is that find, because it really will track stuff down, and you can see it right here. Right underneath that is body 2. Now what I'm going to do here is I'm going to copy the fill for body 1. I need that color because that's the original color that's going to be for screen. I'm going to copy that, Command C or Control C, and then I'm going to delete that style altogether. I'm going to come back to my CSS, and I know this is called body 1. I'm going to paste it in here. So rewinding back to, intro class, there's three places you can put CSS. You can put it in line, which is what they're doing here. This is in line. It's in with the actual shape. There's internal, which would go up in the head. And then there's external, which is what we're doing here in a external file format. So what I'm going to do here is inline will trump any other style, internal or external. So I actually have to delete the style from here. And here's the other one for body 2. I'm going to copy that and delete that here. And I save that, come back here, and this is going to be pound body 2. Save. So if I would preview this, I'm really not going to see any change right now because I just basically moved the style from inline to the external style sheet so I can actually make this responsive. So you can see here we have blue and here we have that orange. I'm going to copy both of those now and move it down to tablet and change these to be whatever color I want them to be. So I'll come over here and I'm going to have this one be pink. Copy that. And this one be this mustard. Save. Then I'm going to copy those again, and I'm going to come down in between the mobile squigglies and paste them again. And this time I'm going to copy and paste the next two colors. You know what, I messed that up. I'm going to go up here and do that. I want these to be pinks, and then that to be mustard, and that to be this blue. Okay, so again, organization always helps here, and you can see now if everything is according, we should have 3 different color schemes based on the size. So I'm going to jump back over to Chrome. Ah, look at that. So here we have on screen teal and that orange, then it goes to the 2 pinks, and then it goes to blue and yellow. So based on what device this is viewed at, it will be a different color monster. Pretty amazing. So a couple little things before you start experimenting and do this with all your different shapes is you want to make sure here that obviously that this is in between these 2 squigglies and this is in between these 2 squigglies. This one does not have any because there is not a media query at the top. This is just all devices. So if we didn't put these two, it would always stay at that top, the body 1 and body 2 up here. Another thing is you want to make sure that you delete the style from the actual SVG, because this color will trump anything else. So if I come down here to pupil, again, I have to do the same thing with fill. Some have strokes, and you can play with that. But you want to delete this from here and make sure it's defined in the external. And one more thing I want to add, we want to change our background colors, obviously not to be this horrific color, but I would add also up here at the all is, let's do an SVG tag. So obviously this is one big SVG, and if you notice here, I just don't like how when it's large, I can only see his eyes. It's kind of zoomed in on his eyes. So I'm going to change this SVG size to have a width of 100%, and I'm going to have a height of 100 VH. 100 VH is 100% of the viewport height. Oops, let me go back and take a look now. So now you can see I don't just see his eyes, I see his whole body, and he'll always be the height of the browser window. So as we zoom and play with the responsiveness, he always is 100% visible. All right, go have some fun and experiment and make your responsive robot.